99.9% of every currency ever created is dead. The average lifespan of a government-issued currency is 27 years. 27. Not centuries, not generations, less than a single mortgage term. Every coin, every note, every monetary system that felt permanent to the people using it, almost all of them, failed. Here's what killed them, and whether your money is next. Money Origins, the channel that traces the full arc of money from the first commodity currencies of the ancient world to whatever comes next. By the end of this, you'll understand the 4 specific mechanisms that have destroyed currencies throughout history, why one form of money has outlasted every empire that tried to replace it, and what that pattern tells us about a 15-year-old digital currency that half the world thinks is either the future or a fantasy. There's a checklist at the end of this, built entirely from history, not opinion. Stick around for it. Quick note before we go further. Nothing here is financial advice. This is history. What you do with it is your call. Think about what that statistic actually means. Researchers who have cataloged monetary history estimate that somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 currencies have existed across recorded civilization. Of those, the overwhelming majority are completely gone. Not reformed, not renamed, gone. The ones still functioning today represent a fraction of a fraction. And here's the part that should give you pause. None of those dead currencies died because people wanted them to. Every single one of them had governments defending it, economists explaining why it was sound, and ordinary people building their lives around it. The Roman denarius was the dollar of the ancient world, trusted across 3 continents, used by soldiers, merchants, senators. The continental dollar was backed by the promise of a brand new nation. The German Papiermark had an entire modern banking system behind it. They all died anyway. So the question isn't whether currencies can die. History answered that. The question is how, and whether the pattern repeats. The historical record points to 4 mechanisms. They're not random. They're almost boringly consistent. The first is debasement, slow-motion theft by the issuer. Rome did this across 2 centuries. The denarius started as nearly pure silver. By the 3rd century AD, it was roughly 2% silver and the rest was cheap alloy. Emperors needed to fund wars and bureaucracies, so they melted coins and stretched the metal. Prices across the empire rose to compensate. What looked like inflation to Roman citizens was actually their government quietly taking purchasing power back. The currency didn't collapse in a day, it rotted. And then, one morning, the system couldn't hold, and it didn't. The second cause is conquest. This one is blunt. When one civilization absorbs another, the losing side's money becomes a relic overnight. The Aztec cacao-based exchange system, the Byzantine solidus in regions swallowed by the Ottoman expansion, dozens of colonial-era currencies erased by the simple fact that the entity backing them no longer existed. Conquest doesn't need an economic argument, it just needs to win. The third is hyperinflation, the most dramatic and the most studied. Weimar Germany in 1923 is the textbook case, a wheelbarrow of banknotes to buy a loaf of bread. Workers paid twice daily so they could spend wages before they lost value by evening. Zimbabwe's dollar collapsed so completely in the late 2000s that the government eventually issued a $100 trillion note, a denomination that by the time it was printed couldn't buy a bus ticket. Both cases share the same root. Governments printed money to cover obligations they couldn't otherwise meet. Trust collapsed faster than supply could be managed, and the currency became worthless before anyone in power admitted it was happening. The fourth cause is the quietest and the most instructive. Pure loss of confidence. No invasion, no printing press. Just a collective decision that the thing isn't worth what it claims to be worth. This has happened to currencies backed by nothing but reputation, and it can happen fast. Confidence, once it starts to leave, tends not to give warning. 4 mechanisms, thousands of examples, one pattern. Here's what makes gold strange in this context. It has no government backing. No central bank issues it. No military defends its validity. It cannot be printed, debased in secret, or conjured to cover a budget deficit. And it has functioned as a store of value for somewhere north of 5,000 years. Through the fall of Rome, through the Mongol conquests, through the hyperinflationary spirals of the 20th century, through every single event that destroyed the currencies built to replace it. That's not sentiment. That's a survival record that every failed currency on this list couldn't match. Why? Because gold passes every test that kills fiat money. Governments can't debase it. Conquest changes who holds it, not what it's worth. You can't hyperinflate the supply of a metal that takes years and significant cost to extract. And 5,000 years of consistent use has built a depth of trust that no institution has been able to manufacture from scratch. It's the only money in human history that has never gone to zero. Bitcoin has existed since 2009. By the standards of monetary history, that's not even an adolescence. That's infancy. And that framing matters, because the question the history of failed currencies actually forces us to ask isn't, is Bitcoin legitimate? It's, which of the 4 mechanisms could kill it? And does it have a structural defense? Debasement. Bitcoin has a fixed supply cap written into its protocol. No authority can change it unilaterally. That addresses the Roman problem directly. Conquest. This is the most complex. A sufficiently coordinated government crackdown could restrict access. But Bitcoin has no single point of failure to target. No mint, no central server, no treasury building to seize. It's structurally harder to conquer than any prior monetary system, though not impossible to suppress. Hyperinflation. By design, not possible. The issuance schedule is predetermined and decreasing. Loss of confidence. This is where Bitcoin remains genuinely vulnerable. It is still young enough that a sustained collapse in trust, driven by a catastrophic technical failure, a regulatory hammer, or simply a better alternative, could do what the other 3 mechanisms can't. Trust at 15 years is thin compared to 5,000. That's not a verdict. That's the honest read from the historical checklist. We started with a number, 99.9%. That number isn't a prediction, it's a record. A record compiled by thousands of years of civilizations that each believed their money was different, their system was smarter, their currency was built to last. Most of them were wrong. Gold survived because it couldn't be manipulated by the same forces that destroyed everything else. Bitcoin is trying to do the same thing, by different means, in a different era, with 15 years of track record against a 5,000-year benchmark. Whether that's enough history has never told us in advance. It only tells us after. Worth keeping in mind, this is history and pattern analysis, not a forecast, and definitely not financial advice. What you do with any of this is your decision. If this pattern interests you, the next video goes deeper into one specific case, the Roman denarius against the modern dollar. 2,000 years apart, built on nearly identical logic, heading in a direction that Roman citizens didn't see coming, until it was already too late. That one's called The Denarius versus the Dollar, 2,000 Years of Currency Debasement. It's up next.